Welcome to today's ILTA YouTube video entitled Wrangling Your DMS When Everybody Wants Something Different. We're leaning into the I in ILTA today. I'm your moderator, Daniel Creaney, Enterprise Applications Engineer from Fenwick and West out of New York. And I'm joined by my guests, Carlos Machado and Jack Shepard. Carlos is the founding partner and CEO of Docwise out of Sao Paulo, Brazil, and has been working with the deployment of iManage projects in Brazil, the US, Canada, and Japan for the last 20 plus years. Jack is principal consultant at iManage out of London, England. Jack finds realistic strategies to help users get the most out of their legal services and legal technologies. Before joining iManage, Jack was a practicing attorney at Freshfields, Bruckhaus, and Derringer. So, Jack, in my experience, everybody wants something different to be that templates, security, metadata, naming conventions. What are some best practices administrators can use to give consistent workflow when providing DMS services to a firm?
Well, one strategy you could do is you could just listen to what everybody individually wants and then just create a system that, take account of all of those nuances. And then, but in reality, I think that somebody working on these kinds of projects, you're downplaying your skill set a little bit if you just do that. What I would suggest doing is engaging with the users of the system first as a really crucial starting point. And rather than ask them questions like what security model do you want or what workspace folder structures do you want, I would ask them some more general questions about how they work that then helps you with your skill set to kind of take that information and then design a set of workspace templates, security, metadata, all this good stuff that's going to meet their needs. One of the issues, of course, is that people are going to say different things in all of these conversations. And the reality is you are not going to come up with a solution that meets absolutely everybody's nuanced needs. So you have to work out where you are on that spectrum of making everything nuanced to everybody's needs and the other end of the spectrum being far too generic. And the balance is usually somewhere in the middle. And what I would kind of advise people to do is to look at the core things that are common to all of the people that you're speaking to, and then build all of your configuration around that. And then the final tip I've got is once you kind of come up with an initial draft of what you're going to do, play that back to people, have a subsequent conversation with them and say, hey, how would you feel if this was the kind of system you're using? And then kind of iterate like that.
Great. No, thank you. Thank you. That's very helpful. Carlos, how would you approach that?
Right. I agree with Jack. But, over the years, I have developed my own framework for deploying iManage at law firms. And the way I normally do it is first I identify which practice areas are involved in project, and I suggest mostly everything. So when I make the first meeting with each practice area, I have everything suggested for them, and their job is to make small changes. And I think this way, the end users, they're more confident that we know what we're doing and that we are offering them best practice from over, 100 plus projects we have already done. And then we get together to see everything that each practice area suggested, and then we work on standard, terminology, so we can have consistency between each of these practice areas. And I think one tip that is very important is you try to keep it simple. Mm-hmm. The first folder structure needs to be simple. And one way to do it that people might consider is using, iManage at least has this feature called flexible folders, where you can have a small set of standard folders and another set of optional folders that people can create when needed. So this way you can keep it simple.
The other thing I'd add is that it's really interesting getting people to show you how they're working right now, because that can be quite instructive. They might tell you, oh, this is what we have now, but no one uses this folder ever, or we don't have this. So kind of understanding how people are working now can be really instructive as to what might work for them in the future.
I totally agree with all of that. What I'm hearing is the primary piece, other than the technology, is to make sure you understand everyone's point of view and find out what they really want and provide the advice along those lines. And also something that is very near and dear to my heart, but I always push, is to keep it simple. Less is more always. So thanks, guys. Carlos, leading on from that, how can a firm set up or present their DMS in the most efficient way for finding things?
Okay, so I think we go back to the first question, which is to create an intuitive folder structure for each practice area. That's going to help for sure. But I also think that training is really important, you know, because DMSs are very specific piece of software. And once you understand the best way to use it to find stuff, it makes it really easier for the end users. And so I would focus on training. And one thing that I do with my customers here that I think helps a lot, it's to release like monthly small tips, small videos that we can shoot with some tips on searching, you know, on those connectors you can use, this word and that word or that word, stuff like that, on quotes and etc. That really helps. And I think creating some kind of, you know, KM or best practice area inside the DMS really helps. And I think Jack can speak more. iManage is releasing a tool called Insight Plus, which really helps on creating like a KM or a knowledge area inside the DMS.
Yeah, I mean, finding things is a really interesting thing, because I think the thing you need to look at is, what are people trying to find? And there is quite a big difference between that classic scenario I always found myself in as a lawyer, where a partner asks me to dig out an email and he gives me some sort of vague description of what the email was about, and the email probably doesn't exist anyway. You know, that's like a very different question from where I want to find, for example, a legal research memo somebody wrote on voting entitlements for scheme of arrangement. They're two different objectives that people are trying to achieve. And I think that the first of them, you can kind of tackle that with making sure people are really clear on how to use the search function, for example, in iManage, looking at things like naming conventions, workspace structures, you know, folder structures, and how people are filing emails. But the second one, I think this is what you were talking about at the end there, Carlos, is really more of a knowledge management exercise. And the challenge there becomes, how can you create like a separate repository effectively? We call it curated repository of documents that have been ring fenced and specifically labeled as being useful for knowledge management purposes. Some people put that content in a completely separate library and they kind of email it to a knowledge team. Other people have knowledge folders or executed documents folders set up within their workspaces, and that helps people find things as well. But really, that second part is all around like just segregating that information from the day-to-day transactional stuff.
Again, I agree. We've all been asked to find that needle in the haystack, right? It's sometimes impossible. So it sounds like being proactive about it, structuring your DMS in a way that folks know the best practices for searching, and giving them the training they need to use the product seems like you can set yourself up for success that way. Jack, again, what can legal technologists do to encourage data and users away from those silos outside of outside of a DMS, file shares, etc., and get data into a DMS?
Well, I think this is a problem at most organizations, really. Like there'll always be some people that have maybe been working in a particular way for decades sometimes, and they're just, they're used to how they're working, and there's no way that they're gonna change. Now, I think that this, to me, in that scenario, really becomes a change management exercise. And personally, I really like the term change management because I think it's a bit of a buzzword, but what I would say is that I take that term to basically mean, how can you convince people to work differently? And for me, this is all lying in the benefits. A classic example is people storing stuff on their desktop and working in documents there. when I'm on those kinds of projects, I usually talk to those people about how they're versioning their documents and how they're obtaining input from other people. And then when they tell you how they do that, they'll say something like, "Oh, to do versions, I copy and paste the document and then rename it." And then you say to them, "Oh, how long does that take you?" And they'll probably say, "Actually, no, it does take me a bit of time." And then you show them how you can do that in your DMS. You can just create a new version. You can add comments to that version. When it comes to sharing it, people can go directly into the document rather than emailing it around. So you can use that. That's kind of the carrot approach of convincing people of the benefits. And again, it's by engaging with them, understanding how they work, drawing out the pain points that they may not even realize. There's also the stick approach, which is not going to work with your really senior partners, but it will work with the the junior people, perhaps just saying, "Look, guys, for information governance reasons, you cannot do this. That this is not an acceptable way of working. You have to put it in the DMS." And my experience is that some lawyers, in fact, most lawyers are quite risk averse. And when you tell them, we could get sued if you don't do this, they tend to come into line pretty quickly. So that's how I'd approach that particular problem.
What are your thoughts, scholars?
Daniel, I think this is probably the most important question we are discussing today, because if people doesn't really adopt the system and store documents outside the DMS, I think the main purpose is just gone. And we normally joke here that users can adopt a DMS by love or by terror, and we prefer love. And what I mean by that is that when the user feels the benefit of the solution is when they really adopt it. Is then when they find they need something and they find it, then they tend to adopt it more. But on the other hand, I normally use some terror as well. And what we normally do is kind of block people from saving outside the DMS. So I can literally take off, the save as buttons from Office and make it harder for people to save outside iManage. It's not really completely blocking, but it's making it difficult to do it. I would say 90% of my customers, we have this set up where we block users from saving outside. And the other 10% call me saying, the project is not really good. Not everyone uses it correctly. So for me, it's kind of, you need to do it. If you want to be successful, you need to block it out. Mm-hmm. And one important thing we need to do to block it out is create spaces for everything inside the DMS. And that, I mean, like personal workspaces or, KM workspaces or internal administrative folders like for HR or finance or wherever. So we need to cover everything so users don't have an excuse for not saving stuff in the DMS. You have a space for everything inside the DMS. And of course, coming back to what I said before, training, training is essential.
I think that's a really good point, because sometimes people, it's not like they're deliberately saving it out of the DMS, but they'll often say things like, "I don't know what should go in the DMS and what should go in OneDrive." So I think providing clarity around that is super important. The other thing I wanted to just add is that when you're doing one of these projects, you'll probably find a group of people that are really opposed to DMS and a group of people that are really on board with DMS you've chosen. Maybe they've used it at a prior firm, for example. Now, I think it's more convincing if the naysayers are being persuaded by their fellow practicing lawyers rather than hearing it from, for example, a central IT team. So the more you can involve those people in the project, I think the more you can kind of leverage that.
Yeah, definitely. I'm hearing a lot of similarities in my my DMS administrator career. It's something I've had success with more than the terror, let's say, is path of least resistance. Just make the DMS that much easier to use than whatever other solution that they're trying to glue together outside of the DMS. For things like compelling people to use it that may not want to use it, it's a little bit more tricky for a technologist. Say, you need more buy-in higher up the firm chain to do that, and that's, you know, another conversation. So that food for thought, definitely, very, very helpful. Firms in general, I believe, are putting more and more data into the TMS. It's a trusted and safe place for your data. There's the audit trail. There's, you know, we're all familiar with it. Is it possible for the DMS to be a working space for drafting documents, you know, day-to-day drafting, and also a place for the kind of static official file? How do you feel about that, Jack?
Well, I think that I think first of all, it's a good idea to try and have that model, like, because I think the thing, so for two reasons really. I think lawyers often complain about information being scattered across different systems, and they don't know which system to go to for what purpose. So if you've got all your information in one place, that's going to be easier for them. Looking forward, I think, and particularly if we're thinking about a world of, you know, AI and large language models and stuff, the more data you've got in your DMS, the more you can leverage those things. And if you're talking about working files like email, like, you know, like sort of like matter of record stuff like emails, and then your work product like documents, having those in the same place can be really helpful, because one provides context to the other. And I think you're going to get a lot of power out of kind of those kind of extractive technologies in the future if you've got it in the same place. I think that the challenge you've got, though, is that obviously if you're having more information in one place, when lawyers are doing things like searching or where they're browsing for things, it can introduce quite a bit of noise into the experience for people. So the classic one, lawyers always say, you know, they're searching for a document, and then a load of emails come up, and they didn't want an email, they wanted the document. So the thing you've got to really be clear on is how you are going to help users segregate those two pieces of information. And that can be done through all the tools of the trade that are available in all DMSs, like, for example, using metadata to categorize things, using workspace structures, all that kind of stuff. Improves the data hygiene that helps you deliver that outcome of it being an official file as well as a place for working documents.
Interesting. Jack, would you, it just occurred to me, would you put the official file in the same workspace as drafting documents, or would you separate those two out?
I'd put it in the same workspace. I'd have them in different places though. I'd have, like, you know, the classic model would be like a correspondence folder, and then a documents folder, and I'd probably want to subdivide the documents folder into, you know, maybe executed documents and work in progress documents or something like that, to provide a bit more data hygiene, and where possible get metadata inheritance on the documents based on what folder it's in, because that's going to improve things like search.
Yeah, and very interesting take. Carlos, what are your thoughts?
So, you know, coming back to the last question, once we block people from saving outside iManage, we need to have a place for everything. So, you know, the drafting working documents are going to be there, and the official file is going to be there as well. But it's cultural, you know. So whatever solution we provide to the customer, it needs to be trained and repeated and controlled. So I think one of the things that most firms, they don't do, is that they create rules and they expect it to work, you know. And if you don't have each partner or each manager or whatever you call it to take care of their teams and make sure they are following the rules, that's just not going to happen. But the nice thing about culture is that it's hard to make it happen, but once it happens, it sticks, you know. So if everyone is doing, when you hire new people, people come in and they see the culture and they do it as well, you know, because everyone is doing. So I think it's a cultural thing, and the way to make it happen is, you know, training. The monthly tips, they work for this as well. And you can use the declare as record function, which is really good because it freezes the document, and it also serves as a filter for finding stuff which are marked or declared as record. Is nice. The workspace templates, they need to have a place for the final documents, is important as well. And coming back to what I said before, it needs to be easy to use. You know, let's keep it simple. So If it's a folder structure, the user just drags and drop into the final documents folder or whatever we call it, and then they're done. Or right click and declare as record and they're done. So it needs to be simple and most important, it needs to be controlled over time so the culture sticks, you know.
Definitely. It sounds like this point and the previous points, they all come down to the classic motto of people, process, and technology. Definitely. So I would like to thank you, Jack and Carlos, for joining me today, for your time. I hope those who will be tuning in to view this session later will find great value. And don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to ILTA YouTube for the latest updates in legal technology. We consistently provide timely and high quality content for the legal industry. Please be sure to catch the next Technology Solutions Live Roundtable on February 7th, 2024, entitled Taking Flight, Navigating a Successful Pilot Program. Thank you for watching.
Thank you. Very good.